Welcome, everyone, to the Friday, October 25th, 2024 Halloween episode of On Iowa Politics. It's already off to a spooky start with a technical crash affecting our podcast here. This week, a debate in the 1st District, a preview of the 4th District, and the possibility of non-citizens voting illegally in who knows which districts. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin.Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week are Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief, terrifying Tom Barton. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Aaron.
From the Quad City Times, it's scary Sarah Watson. Hello, Sarah.
Ooh. Hello, Aaron.
From the Sioux City Journal, we have jinxed Jared McNett. Hello, Jared.
Aaron, we got to make this snappy. I have 3 more Chucky movies I need to watch by Friday, so let's...
Fair enough. Let's keep it rolling. Finally, we have Gazette columnist Tombstone Todd Dorman. Hello, Todd.
Hello, and just a note to all of you out there: if you don't like almond joy or mounds, I'll take those. I enjoy them. I know some people throw them away. Not bit of honey. There's nothing you can do with bit of honey.
Yeah.
And toothbrushes. Don't give out toothbrushes. Come on, man.
While we're at it, another one that needs to just be cast aside forever are those interminable bottle caps. Those things are also disgusting.
Oh, I loved the bottle caps as a kid.
I hate to bust on them.
I don't know if I would still, but I did as a kid.
I think Smarties also sort of have to go that way.
For me, it's the candy corn. Ditch the candy corn.
Yeah.
I am in the minority on this. I love candy corn. Cannot get enough candy corn.
It's made from corn syrup, so you're helping the Iowa farmer, perhaps.
There you go. Have scientists verified that, though? By the way, Todd, that's
actually... I don't know.
Yeah.
I know there's no. All I know is that there's no corn syrup in Miller Lite.
I have a friend from college who, no kidding, is that house. He hands out the little boxes of raisins to get on Halloween. We give him so much heck for that. Yeah, see, this is the appropriate response. I will be sharing a link to this
I would egg that house if I was a kid.
So watch where you trick or treat in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You might wind up with some raisins. All right. We are now down to our final 2 podcasts before the November 5th general election. And in Iowa, of course, early voting is well underway. We are off to the races. And speaking of those races, we start this week in the Old West, where Jared's team at the Sioux City Journal has been previewing the 4th congressional district election between Republican incumbent Randy Feenstra and Democratic challenger Ryan Melton. It's one of 2 2022 rematches in these 2024 elections. Jared, obviously, there's not a whole lot of suspense in this one, at least not in the outcome. It's simple math. The 4th is very plainly a heavily Republican district. So if you're not watching to see who wins that election, Jared, what are you watching for? And have you learned anything new in the Journal's process of previewing the election? I understand you talked to both candidates.
Taking that first question, the big thing that I'm going to be watching for is the margin of victory. In 2020, Feenstra beat J.D. Schulten by 24.2 points. And then in 2022, following the redistricting, Feenstra beat Melton by 36.9 points. So I really want to see what the number is this time. And if it's at all closer to the 2020 margin than the 2022 margin, then I think it would be fair to start to wonder about a couple things, including what the impact the Kevin Virgil endorsement for Melton might have made in the race, or, maybe running a second time helped Melton's name ID, which some people vote purely on that, or, maybe the libertarians who didn't have a candidate on the ballot all broke heavily for Melton. Don't know if I buy that one as a possibility if the margin is a little bit tighter, but, there could be a number of factors as far as that first thing goes, what I'm looking for.
Remind me, in the redistricting, are there any specific counties or communities that you're going to be paying attention to this time? Because correct me if I'm wrong, is Story County, so Ames, Iowa State University, is that now? That's now in the 4th district, right?
Oh no, I need to look at my map again. Yes, yes, it would be, because Ryan Melton last time was in Nevada when he ran, which is in Story County. So yeah. Aaron, you also asked what we kind of learned along the way. One of the takeaways in the story was that there's much more money sloshing around this time than last time, which isn't entirely surprising since it's a presidential year versus an off year, but still, the difference is notable, especially for Feenstra. These are the numbers that I got from Open Secrets. In 2022, he raised 2.86 million and spent 1.85 million. Melton raised 53,000 and spent about 48,000. And through September 30th of this year, Feenstra has brought in 4.6 million and spent 3.87 million. So he has spent more this cycle already than he raised last cycle, which is notable. And then his biggest contributors have been contributors related to Versova Management, which is Egg People, Poet LLC, which is the biofuel company, Bolero Energy, which is the refineries folks, BGR Group, which is a consulting firm, and New York Life Insurance. And then he also had contributors related to Summit Agricultural Group, which is, of course, related to the pipeline, giving $15,510. Melton's number isn't that much different than last time. He's raised about $56,940, which is a few thousand more than last time. And his biggest contributors have been, pretty reliable kinds of contributors: National Education Association, Iowa State University, and the University of Iowa, or those people related to those.
Jared, those numbers, do they include the primary part of the cycle as well? And I'm thinking
that's for the full cycle.
Yeah, so I'm thinking specifically about Feenstra's numbers taking a big leap. I wonder how much of that is because he felt obviously he wasn't worried about losing, but felt like he had to do a little more work maybe than usual in this primary cycle than he's used to.
That's definitely a factor too. Obviously, having a primary, you're going to need to be spending more money because you basically have to win twice. So
yeah. All right, and how'd those interviews go? Any shocking revelations, or do you have a couple of disciplined candidates that stayed on message?
They were both pretty well on message the whole time. There wasn't necessarily anything super surprising, but I try to pepper in every couple questions something that's a little more offbeat, just so they maybe loosen up a little bit. I don't know how well that works. People can go read through the interviews to find out.
Perfect. Check out Jared's stories at the Sioux City Journal website, or if you're in Western Iowa, grab a copy of the paper and check those out. All right, let's move all the way across the state now to an Iowa congressional district election that is much more competitive. Eastern Iowa's first district, our other rematch, where Republican incumbent Marionette Miller Meeks once again faces a challenge from Democrat Christina Bohannon. Two candidates debated this past week on Iowa PBS. Someone fact check me if I'm wrong here. Sarah, you'd probably know especially, but I believe this is the only debate these candidates are doing this campaign. Yes? No? Okay, I'm getting a lot of affirmative nods there, so that is correct. All right, so Sarah, this is your turf there at the Quad City Times. What were your impressions of this week's debate between Miller Meeks and Bohannon, and again, what is by all measures a very competitive election?
Yeah, well, certainly it was tense for the first 20 minutes, I thought, over abortion especially. They really were going at each other. This is kind of the first time that they've, in this cycle, that they have tried to check each other on the abortion issue. They both had their topics to bring up. Bohannon kind of kept bringing up the Life at Conception Act and Miller Meeks' sponsorship of it. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. People who've seen her ads know a lot about it. But I thought just what was interesting was just seeing the back and forth between the two over that item. I was kind of expecting Miller Meeks to take a similar stance as Ashley Hinson and say that she, wouldn't support a bill without the exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. She said that she does support those exceptions, but she kind of tried to parry back at what Christina Bohannon was saying by saying that, well, this bill it doesn't include the word abortion. It specifically doesn't criminalize abortions for women that seek them. And so she really tried to downplay the impact of that bill, and said she really tried to emphasize her role as a physician, and that saying that she recognizes that life begins at fertilization, but she didn't really I didn't think that I thought she was going to say, I wouldn't support that if it didn't have the exceptions, but she didn't go that far to say. She instead kind of turned it back onto Bohannon and said, well, what restrictions do you support? Do you support, abortion up until birth? And some of those Republican talking points saying that trying to get consensus on and she said she wanted consensus. She thought there was consensus on access to birth control and no late term abortions. And so putting that back on Bohannon, okay, do you support any restrictions? And Bohannon really kept to the Roe versus Wade standard. And even when asked, so in Iowa, it was 20 weeks after before the Supreme Court ruling. And she said, sure. That was, that she supported what it was like before Iowa passed its fetal heartbeat bill and that those restrictions went into effect. So that was definitely back and forth. Bohannon kind of kept interrupting Miller Meeks on that issue and some others. And I think Miller Meeks kind of got a little combative there. Obviously nothing like one of our national debates, but I thought that was definitely the most interesting back and forth between the two candidates. But at the same time, it didn't really give us a lot of new information other than Miller Meeks saying she didn't think that a 15-week abortion ban or federal legislation on abortion, she didn't think that was coming down the pike. That was probably the new information that we had out of that debate. They also talked about immigration. Bohannon, I think, repeatedly made a point to point out that Miller Meeks may say that she has endorsed a bill on a topic, but voted against another bill that maybe had a better chance of passing in a Democratic-controlled Congress. Kind of trying to hit her on the point that even though you kind of have political cover with a bill such as the immigration bill that the House passed, but you didn't say whether you supported the bipartisan immigration package. And Miller Meeks said, well, that wasn't going to pass the Senate. So it didn't come up in the House. Of course, the House Republicans leader said that they weren't going to pass that after President Trump told them not to pass it. So war in the Middle East, asked Miller Meeks about her address. We've seen that before. I guess those were kind of my main takeaways on the debate. I thought also Bohannon on maybe the foreign policy, she seemed a little less steady than on abortion. She really hammered on abortion, and then some of the other ones she was a little less steady, kind of saying we've got inflation, but also supporting Biden's policies that he's had in office. But I guess those are my main.
Which, I mean, is not surprising because like foreign policy questions can trip up even presidential candidates, let alone people running for the House.
Right.
And I should add to that point, that was an interesting moment for me, specifically because Miller Meeks referenced our profiles and a moment in one of those interviews where I had asked Christina Bohannon about Israel and Gaza. And she said in the interview, there's not consensus on this issue. I wish there was. So I'm going to focus on issues where there is consensus. After that story ran, the campaign wanted to clarify that and say that she was speaking about the war more broadly speaking, not about specifically on the question of aid to Israel. But anyways, Miller Meeks brought that up. And Christina Bohannon said, I don't know what you're talking about, which, I'm not asserting anything. I just was surprised by that too, given the way the interview and publishing of the story and the campaign reaching out had all played out. I thought that was an interesting moment as well. I'm with you overall, Sarah. I think that those early moments on the abortion debate, especially, they were kind of trying to criticize the other's policy and accuse the other of exaggerating their positions on the policy, and that kind of went back and forth for essentially the first 15 minutes of the debate there. I also agree. I don't think we ultimately came out of that with anything new. And if you've been a loyal news consumer, you've probably read about all those and the fact checks within them and know where the truth lies. Anyways, before and after that debate. So
I'd note that every district now, but the 4th congressional district, has had a televised debate.
yeah, that'll be the only one that didn't have one, and the other ones all only had one each, right? Did anybody do two? I'm pretty sure everyone just did one, right?
So I mean, I can say for sure that there was only one televised debate for both the 1st and 2nd district candidates.
And
I don't know if in the 3rd district, Lanon Bakam or Zach Nunn did another debate outside of the one that they did with KCCI.
I'm
I don't think
99% sure that was the only one they did. I know for sure they didn't do Iowa PBS. And yeah, so I'm 99% sure that was the only one they did. So that's kind of crazy to think about too. You don't have to be too long in the tooth in this industry to remember when these federal candidates would debate multiple times, 2, 3, 4 times during a general election campaign, and now it's you're lucky if you get one.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if in the not too distant future there's just not any
They're
at
gone
all,
altogether.
especially at the House level.
Yep. I don't disagree. Which is unfortunate, even as I sit here and say, well, they don't really matter because they don't change the rates either. I admit it. I'm hypocritical about it. All right. Lay off. All right. Let's stay in the 1st district here just briefly. We have some more allegations of improprieties. This has been a fun campaign to cover. You may remember questions being raised previously about Marinette Miller Meek's residence. Sarah mentioned that got brought up briefly towards the end of the debate. Well, now the Miller Meeks campaign has raised a question about whether Bohannon violated copyright law in one of her campaign ads. Tom, you have no conflict of interest here because it was over an Iowa shirt, not an Iowa State shirt. So you're safe. Tell us more about this kerfuffle.
Yeah. So, an attorney for Iowa Republican Marinette Miller Meeks campaign sent a letter of inquiry to the University of Iowa, urging it to take action over an apparent trademark infringement by Democratic challenger Christina Bohannon. So, Alan Ostergren, who's a prominent Iowa conservative lawyer, sent this letter to the University of Iowa's vice president for legal affairs and general counsel, alerting them to an apparent unauthorized use of a university trademark in a campaign ad by Bohannon's campaign. So the letter references a recent ad that started airing earlier this month. In the ad, Christina Bohannon is wearing a black T-shirt with gold, all capital lettering, reading Iowa, and it also includes the phrase Team Iowa on the back. The ad shows Christina Bohannon, who I should point out is a University of Iowa law professor whose expertise is in intellectual property law. The ad shows her running on a track and accusing Marinette Miller Meeks of panicking voters about girls' sports instead of focusing on tougher problems faced by Iowans. Alan Ostergren, in his letter, states that the University of Iowa has registered the word Iowa in gold lettering with a black background with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and asserts that Bohannon's use is a violation of the federal law that protects registered trademarks from infringement. It also talks about that the ad, according to them, has the misuse of the phrase Team Iowa, and that is a university trademark or part of their university words, logos, etc. that they have rights to. Anyway, so in the letter, Alan Ostergren goes on saying that the trademark with its distinctive font and coloring scheme is instantly recognizable in the ad, and it encourages the University of Iowa to promptly demand that the campaign, cease and desist from using the university's trademark in political advertising. And the Miller Meeks campaign followed up with a statement demanding that the Bohannon campaign immediately take down the ad. And Ostergen in his letter also suggested that the university should consider bringing court action for injunctive relief against the Bohannon campaign, which would legally require the campaign not to use any university affiliated logos. I reached out to the University of Iowa. They did not immediately respond. Well, I should say they still haven't responded to my questions or requests for comment on the letter. They haven't said whether the university hasn't said whether it considers the campaign's use in that ad to be a violation or infringement on its trademark, and hasn't said whether it plans to take any action against Bohannon and her campaign. The response from Bohannon's campaign, they called this what they termed to be, quote, a desperate attempt from Marionette Miller Meeks, to distract from her record, which they mention includes pushing a national abortion ban with no exceptions, which Sarah previously mentioned, as that was a point of discussion during the debate earlier this week. And then it also, the campaign noted that it hadn't been contacted by the university, and contends that the T-shirt worn by Christina Bohannon in the ad is a custom design with a unique font. And then it also notes that Miller Meeks and Miller Meeks campaign has repeatedly promoted an annual University of Iowa themed fundraiser, including using images of Kinnick Stadium.
Is that ad still up or still running?
As far as I know, in fact, I saw was it today? It was either today or yesterday. I saw a tweet from Christina Bohannon's campaign, essentially touting the ad.
I'm really enjoying the back and forth allegations with this race. The residency stuff is a real throwback, and then the copyright law thing isn't something I recall popping up in a race before. So from afar, this has been fun to see.
Todd, multiple times there, I and our YouTube viewers might have caught you chuckling as Tom relayed this story. I asked you a similar question last week. Can I assume from your reaction that we are now dealing with a double nothing burger in this campaign?
Yeah, the University of Iowa isn't commenting, and I doubt they will comment. They only have to hold out a few more days until this is all over. I don't think they want to wade in on this in any way, shape, or form.
Todd, you don't think they would take legal action against one of their law professors?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I realize that copyright means something, but I mean, the word Iowa on a shirt, maybe that's copyrighted, but I that would be kind of weird if the name of the state was copyrighted.
I should say that this is a matter about trademark infringement as opposed to copyright.
Yeah.
So the argument here is that the lettering, right, the font, the colors, that's all part of the University of Iowa's brand and their trademark. So another thing that I forgot to mention, Alan Ostergen, the conservative attorney that sent the letter to the University of Iowa, also mentioned that that Bohannon's actions or the actions of her campaign could also be a violation of university policies that prohibit the use of any University of Iowa wordmark, trademark, logo, symbols without express written approval.
Without express written consent of Major League Baseball, something like that. So
exactly.
Yeah, the University of Iowa is not going to do anything. They're going to sort of remain silent while this all blows over. I mean, they got the allegation out there. I don't know how troubling it is. Nothing's going to happen. So
Independent of politics, this is actually something that's been a hobby horse of mine for a while. I really don't think any public university should be able to copyright anything related to like their team name or their university name whatsoever.
I remember when Syracuse University tried to trademark the color orange,
Oh, for crying out loud!
and
I remember that one.
they were told they weren't going to be able to do that.
Not terribly long ago, I remember my Badgers going after high
Waukee.
schools about
Waukee.
Waukee. Yeah, so Big Bad Bucky came in, said Waukee couldn't use the motion W, which is what they call it up there. I think they, in fairness, I will say, by the way, I say not in fairness, I say in fairness, not to excuse. Definite distinction there. In fairness, I think they also went after a few Wisconsin high schools that had been doing that too. It was blood sport. They didn't care where you were, but it wasn't a great look that Wisconsin going after this Iowa. Maybe that was a year that the Hawkeyes beat the Badgers, and so they were all cranky. I know that doesn't happen very often, so I wouldn't know.
I don't think, maybe it was a really bad year that they thought that a high school football team might be mistaken for their team because of the logo. But
yeah, well played. All
Did
right.
I read, Tom, and maybe you already said this, that the Bohannon campaign says it's like a unique font.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah.
What is the
their
font?
contention.
I love. Yeah. Can we get a public information request on the font used in the campaign?
Well, they mentioned the specific font.
They did
in the response they sent to me.
Bless their hearts.
Let me see if I can pull this up.
Bohannon could probably represent them in any lawsuit that might be brought against the campaign.
Yeah, that's true.
Gosh.
Maybe a nice Garamond font.
Comic Sans.
Comic Sans.
This whole thing should be written up in Comic Sans.
So the response was that the T-shirt was a custom design with a unique font called College V or College 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
So, Hawkeyes fans, if you want to make your own shirt and you don't want to pay the university money for a T-shirt, College 5, that's the font that you want to use.
Font. Oh my gosh. Good times. All right. We'll see what cough controversy is coughed up in that election next week. We're going to finish this week, appropriately enough, in the voting booth. This week, Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate, the state's top elections official, alerted local election officials to a list of more than 2,000 names that Pate says may be Iowans who are legal residents but not full citizens and who are thus not eligible to vote, but who may be trying to register and or vote, which would be illegal. Pate has ordered poll workers to challenge the ballots of any of these individuals if they attempt to vote, and his office would then determine whether they are U.S. citizens and thus eligible. So if that sounded complicated, it's partially because it is, and it's partially because it's hard to explain. So here's essentially what's happening. The Secretary of State's office has found more than 2,000 Iowans who, at the last time that they signed documents with the Iowa Department of Transportation, were legal residents but without full U.S. citizenship. So these same 2,000-ish individuals have since registered and or voted in an election. But it's possible that in the time in between, some of those individuals obtained their citizenship. So without knowing that, again, Pate's office has flagged these names and instructed poll workers to challenge these individuals' ballots if they attempt to vote until his office can determine whether they are full U.S. citizens and eligible to vote. It also should be noted quickly that Pate's office's review of previous elections found 87 votes that were cast illegally by Iowans, and this goes back multiple cycles, and another 67 who illegally registered to vote. And both actions, by the way, are Class D felonies in Iowa, which carries up to 5 years in prison. Todd, we've already heard from Lynn County Auditor Joel Miller, who ran against Paul Pate. Miller has said it's unfair to ask poll workers to do this. Policing of the voter rolls in the middle of an election. The League of United Latin American Citizens has raised questions and concerns about the impact on the community, Latino community in Iowa. What should we make of all this?
It was kind of an abrupt story. I mean, you've got Paul Pate who goes out there every year and talks about how great our voting system is, how secure it is, easy to vote, hard to cheat, all of that stuff. And then pops up a couple of weeks before the election and says, oh, by the way, there's 2,000 non-citizens that may or may not have voted or be registered to vote. I didn't see the time frame, when these folks signed up or
Right.
like, did this all happen last year? Is this over 5 years? I mean, what's the time frame? Because if it's over multiple years, then if you add it all together and release it like they did, it smacks of being a political announcement that's supposed to, I guess, prove that there's voter fraud, which Republicans maintain there is. I don't know what it accomplishes, frankly, but and the Latino community, I mean, there's when you start telling people that if they vote or register to vote that they're guilty of a felony, there are going to be people that probably are completely eligible to vote that are going to be like, yeah, I'm not even going to mess with it. Right. So I think that's what they're worried about.
Yep.
It's interesting timing. I don't know how long this is, if this is something that happens routinely every year, if this is suddenly a big problem. But I mean, the desired effect apparently was to make people call into question, whether illegal immigrants are voting, which is, of course, an attack line that you hear from Republican candidates, President Trump, all those folks.
Yeah. And to be clear again, and I know it's not what you were saying, but just to drive home the fact that what has been caught are legal U.S. residents.
Yeah.
They just don't have full citizenship and thus aren't eligible to vote. Yeah, to your point, Todd, it's 87 that they caught over a number of cycles. And when I interviewed Secretary Pate about it, he didn't give an exact number, but he said something to the effect of it went back through their system, which went back to, I want to say he said 2000, the 2000 election. So we're literally talking about 87 votes over 2.5, just more than 2 decades worth of election cycles.
Which sort of undermines their explanation that, we just got these DOT numbers and felt they were so important we needed to announce them. I mean, if they've been getting them for 15 years and this is the first time they announced them, it's interesting.
That's a good point too. And that I didn't get into this in my story, but one of the things Pate said was the reason he started doing this was there's a federal voter registration list. He called it the SAVE list, and I'll confess to not being super familiar with it. But what he said is that states don't have easy access to that federal list, and so this was a way to do that work without getting that list by cross-checking voter registration rolls with Iowa DOT documents to determine who is full U.S. citizens and who are not. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, and watch for more coverage on this in the coming days. We're hearing more from Joel Miller on this, and including he's already looked at the current list, and there may be some folks in there who have already voted in this election. But also, like I said, he talked about his concern with poll workers too. Sorry, Todd.
I can't wait to follow this ongoing investigation after the election is over. I'm sure we'll see lots of major developments after it's over, and it's I mean, that's
just like the Christina Bohannon trademark issue. That'll go last beyond November 5th.
Yeah, right? There's going to be plenty to write about with all these investigations that are going to
residency.
They're going to stretch into, and be totally as important as they are now.
Well, I think that wraps it up. We'll come back next week for our last pre-election podcast. So make sure you come back and join us for that one. In the meantime, as I'm about to pitch you, please be following us on the social medias and our websites and in our print products. We're doing our best to get you ready for the election, whether you voted already or not. We're doing our best to keep you informed. That'll do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on the YouTube where you can smash that like button. You also can find the podcast each week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox, you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Todd Dorman, and our producer, bone-chilling Bailey Cichon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone. Be good, and happy Halloween, and send all your mounds to Todd.